When people are new to the Dhamma and have not yet attained the right view, they still hold wrong views per default that hinder their progress. A lot of the work towards stream entry is about undoing those wrong views so that only right view remains. One of the more problematic views is that either all craving is good or that all craving is bad. Both of those views are wrong, even though the latter is a bit closer to liberation. While all craving is indeed suffering, not all craving is unwholesome. If it was, the Buddha would have just said so. It is much easier to simply say craving equals bad, but the Buddha made it about good, bad, wholesome, and unwholesome. Today we learn about skillful craving. When talking about craving, the Buddha usually mentioned two extremes. One extreme is a classical case of a Pituthana, or simply a worldly or ordinary person. This is by no means an insult, by the way, even if it sounds like the term muggle from Harry Potter or something. It is just that Pituthananas are dedicated towards and fixed on sensual pleasures. They see and view that as a solution to their problems. It could be a fixation on drugs, nice vacations, food, harmony, family, politics, basically everything the Buddha mentioned in the detailed descriptions of the term wrong speech. There he listed basically everything that people are interested in, and as such, as they are interested in such things, they talk about it quite frequently. Interestingly, many of the more modern meditation methods that revolve around good feelings are also part of this strategy. People talk about it all the time, and they enjoy it, and they want to recreate those circumstances. What unifies this type of person is a fundamental wish to experience good feelings. All of the aforementioned methods are just vehicles to get to that. To an ordinary person, craving is almost universally considered to be good and inviting and worthy having. Their entire existence revolves around that. They want to feel good. And then there's a second type of person who is the polar opposite. This type of person would best be called an ascetic, and they have seen the problematic nature of craving. They have seen that it is painful in reality and not worth going for. As a result, they shy away from all kinds of good feelings and overshoot the mark in another direction. Instead of identifying their own attitude towards their feelings as problematic, they identify the feelings themselves as problematic. Before his enlightenment, the Buddha Gautama was this kind of person. And in short, to the Pituthana, all good feelings are good, and to the ascetic, all good feelings are bad, to paraphrase a bit. What unifies these two kinds of people is that their life still revolves around feelings, like a dog that you leash to a tree who runs in circles around it. They either over-affirm them or under-affirm them, but no matter what, all their striving still circles around the way they feel. They are still tethered to feeling overall. And at some point the Buddha went beyond this kind of trap and figured out that the real problem is not the feelings themselves, but in our attitude towards those feelings. Well, this might sound simple today. It was by no means simple back then, and it is by no means that simple today. I would even say that a person who has seen the Dhamma has a unique kind of appreciation of how freakishly difficult the thing the Buddha did was. As a rule of thumb, if you think it's simple or easy, then you have not yet understood the Dhamma sufficiently. Then you really are on a wrong path. I would strongly consider that you reflect a bit about your experience and your understanding of the Dhamma. But enough on that. What is this craving that the Buddha identified as a real problem? After all, bad feelings feel bad, don't they? Why shouldn't we avoid them and see good ones instead? Well, craving is, as mentioned before, in our attitude towards our experience and more specifically towards our own feelings. Craving is a resistance towards experience or feeling as they present themselves on their own. And that resistance can take one of three forms. We either want an even better experience, we want to avoid a bad one, or we want to experience something at all, which is an urge to distract ourselves. Technically, greed and aversion are also urges to distract ourselves, but they work on a much more gross level than the delusion or distraction urge that is very subtle, just being active for the sake of activity. And those three things have been called the three poisons by the Buddha, and they are greed, aversion, and delusion. They are what poisons our experience. They are what makes it suffering. And those are the three aspects of craving that exist in relation to the three types of feeling. Technically, you could view all of them as distraction mechanisms from the Dhamma. The Dhamma is always there, ready to be seen, to be discerned, but this is only possible when we do not distract ourselves from this very Dhamma. We do that per default. simply through our central engagement, through our conduct. Our conduct is our main distraction. Yet, that is exactly what we do all the time. Through every action of greed, every action of aversion, and every action of distraction, we look somewhere else and strengthen our view that we have to look somewhere else. And thus, we do not look for the Dhamma. Once we stop that, the Dhamma naturally becomes visible here and now. And this is why progress is rather natural, or can be rather natural. The problem is that we kind of start in a deluded manner with lots of unknown habits that effectively lead to distraction from the Dhamma that we do not even notice because we have been doing them for such a long time. And this is a default state, and we can start out like this and have to undo it if we want liberation from suffering. The starting position is always a state where we are affected by craving and wrong views, and in this case we have to be very wary. Technically, wrong views are also kind of craving, but I like to distinguish the two to highlight the hierarchical nature of the two. Some craving can only exist as long as more deeply rooted kinds of cravings are there. As an example, we can only crave TV if we deeply value distraction. And if we want to or not, we have to work with craving as we are always already affected through our views. We are already in the middle of craving. We want something. That is kind of the thing. And we have to work our way out of that wanting with our wanting, because there's no other way, because wanting is everywhere. It's the default. Experience already arises to us. It presents itself with wanting, and we cannot escape that by conventional means. And as a result, the sutras even say that we have to overcome clinging with clinging. I sadly have forgotten the sutta number, but one of you will very likely know that and post it in the comments. So thank you for that. We have to skillfully use the right kind of craving, clinging, and self to ultimately overcome all of those. Or as, for example, the Sutta Nipata, Samyutta Nikaya 51.15 says, they formerly had the desire to attain perfection, but when they attained perfection, the corresponding desire faded away. They formerly had the energy to attain perfection, but when they attained perfection, the corresponding energy faded away. They formerly had the idea to attain perfection, but when they attained perfection, the corresponding idea faded away. They formerly inquired regarding attaining perfection, but when they attained perfection, the corresponding inquiry faded away, which is very important. And if you read carefully, the sutras never really explain that all craving is bad. In fact, that is a legitimate desire, a legitimate craving that those people had. And the Buddha never said that you should avoid all craving. It would be very easy to say that, but he did never do that. He just said that all craving is suffering, and that is very true. It can be quite easy to stop all efforts at liberation by memeing yourself into believing that to follow the path, you have to abandon the path. This is a very wrong view that stops all progress at some point. And as a result, the sutta speaks in terms of wholesome and unwholesome, and not in terms of craving and non-craving in many, many cases. Some craving is indeed good and beneficial and is leading to non-craving. And that was a genius discovery of the Buddha. And also that craving is something very, very personal. And it is quite easy to come to the conclusion that all craving is bad and should be avoided. But this kind of view does not lead to lasting liberation, only to a temporary one. You are still tethered to a post by your wrong views. And this is why the Buddha was such a genius. He discovered that right in the middle, there is a class of craving that is leading to dispassion, cessation, and nibbana. Yet if you affirm all craving or avoid all craving, you will never get there. It's impossible. You build the raft that carries you to the island of safety, to the further shore, based on materials from this unsafe shore, and that shore is full of craving, if you want to or not. So the craving to end craving is a very wholesome one, but it's pretty much the only wholesome craving. And just because you associate certain kinds of craving with the path or with the Dhamma, like Moranjana or something, does not make it wholesome. It's not. Only the very, let's say, general view-like craving that you want to overcome suffering, that is wholesome. Any craving that leads to a lessening of future craving, that is wholesome. But you have to see that for yourself. You have to test that out through trial and error approaches. You arrive at the sure path to Nibbana at the very moment you understand this. This is your right view that starts the path. Stream entry is the very beginning where you have finished building your raft and have set sail towards the island of Nibbana. Yet you still have a lot of work to do. Even though you arrived at a certain milestone, yet you still are affected by lust and aversion, and those fetters still exist and influence you. It is just that you have learned to skillfully maneuver the currents of the sea of craving. The understanding of a Sotapanna is a knowledge of good as good, bad as bad, wholesome and unwholesome, essential and unessential. leading to liberation and leading away from liberation. It is the independence of a teacher. They have understood the entire training pretty much on a very fundamental level, on the level of gut feeling even. They have known and seen it. It's not just an intellectual understanding. It's a liberating experience. Or as Thanissaro Bhikkhu said at some point, it's an earth-shattering experience even. Simply because it's a total shift of your perception, a total shift of your frame of reference, so to speak. And this is earth-shaking, earth-shattering. And if people say that stream entry is a blimp or something, they have no idea. There are good types of craving, and it is easy to meme yourself into believing that all craving is bad and should be avoided. All craving is suffering, and as such, we like to avoid it. But that does not mean that we actually will arrive at the goal if we follow such an approach. Seeing craving as painful is not a noble kind of knowledge. That is something all of the, rivaling ascetics of the past understood, and it is something that all religions of the present understood as well. Your conduct is problematic. The most proximate cause of your suffering is in your unwholesome conduct of greed, aversion, and delusion. And if you stop all that, at least for a time, you will be free from suffering. But the Dhamma goes beyond all of this. And to go beyond, you have to be smart. The accepting or avoiding of craving in its entirety will not get the job done, because there are even deeper underlying roots. Imagine that you have a horribly dirty room, but you also have to have understood that all you have to do is to attain peace, is to stop craving here and now, to stop wanting to clean it. This will surely even work to a degree. You just stop resisting the unpleasant feeling of the untidy room, and you are at peace. Sweet liberation. If only that bad smell in the background wouldn't always come back. Not only that, the smell is even getting worse. Those defilements, if left unchecked, will grow out of control again, and you are back to square one. It would be skillful to crave for a cleaner room, and only then stop the effort at last. Simply stopping all craving here and now will not lead to lasting liberation. That is not possible, simply because there are things cooking, festering in the background. Those ultimate, very deep-rooted underlying views, those have not been taken care of. If you just fix your conduct, as in not act out of craving, this is not leading you to the lasting kind of liberation that the Buddha was talking about. That is virtue. Fixing your conduct in body, speech, and mind is virtue, nothing else. The Dhamma goes beyond, and only once you are free, for the most part, of this wrong kind of conduct, can you even access the Dhamma. Can you access the teachings on dependent origination that free you forever? This is when the weakening of craving turns into the uprooting of craving that I have often talked about in the past. And to get the job done, we need the right and skillful kind of craving that is leading to less future craving. Even if craving is involved, the overall tendency is what matters. And even more, the entire process has to be gradual. You wean yourself off of the very unwholesome kinds of craving to introduce better and better ones until you can let go of the raft and training aids altogether. You should crave stuff that helps you overcome craving. Otherwise, there is no gradual training and no path for you. The path is made on this shore, and the shore has craving as one of the necessary building blocks that cannot and should not be denied. Liberation would be easy if literally all craving would be bad. Then literally everyone could do it. Most of the work before stream entry is about attaining this knowledge through contemplation, experimenting, and testing what is wholesome and unwholesome for you specifically. You want to throw away all wrong views so that only right view remains. This is a practice of throwing away, but you throw away the right stuff at the right time so that nothing festering remains that craving and clinging could regrow from. This is what makes it so difficult and so individual. We all have our individual wrong views and cravings, and the way out of the maze can only be walked by you alone. Let us now come to the most important point. Some people think that all craving is good, and others think that all craving is bad. Both are intuitive and very natural to do, depending on your progress, but both are wrong views. To overcome suffering for good, you need the right kind of craving that leads to the ending of craving, as one of the sutta snippets I have cited in this talk mentioned. We overcome craving with craving and need a raft made from materials from this shore, which has craving and clinging and self and suffering. There's no path if we deny all craving. If we deny the self, then we cannot overcome the self, because it's clearly there as a chain of dependent origination states. With ignorance as a condition, there's clinging, there's craving, there's clinging, there's self, there's being, there's suffering. All those things are there. With no ignorance, there's no craving, there's no clinging, there's no self, there's no being, there's no suffering. With a bit of craving, for the Sotapanna or higher, for the Seka, there is a bit of clinging, a bit of craving, a bit of self, a bit of being, a bit of suffering. So they are in an in-between state. But yeah, anyway, this should be enough for today. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoy what I do, feel free to like, subscribe, join our Discord server, do all the YouTube things. But until then, I wish you a pleasant day and goodbye.